Contemporary.
Cheated.
Ahead of her time in regards to our understanding of science.
A scientist of great achievements and the unspoken hero behind the discovery of the structure of DNA, Rosalind Franklin made it her mission to reach the impossible. She dedicated years to research, overcoming countless hurdles and mishaps such as sexism in the workforce, oppression from her father, and an overall barrier as a result of the societal conformities of the time. Despite this, Franklin accomplished her goal of becoming a physical chemist while making groundbreaking discoveries by compromising with misogynistic peers who doubted and even stole her work, and by giving up the life of a typical woman of the 1950s. The conflict throughout Rosalind's career and her eventual compromise were two key factors in her personal journey to discover the structure of DNA. Rosalind Elsie Franklin was born on July 25, 1920 in Notting Hill, London, England, the second child of 5 born into a wealthy Jewish family. Growing up, Rosalind was faced with hardships that challenged her strength and ability to break the gender roles set for her, and her father was one of the many hurdles. Franklin's father, Ellis Franklin, was a firm believer in tradition. He believed that if a woman does not have to work, she shouldn't. During the 1950s, women were excluded from positions of authority and were forced into stereotypical roles, like being housewives or catering to their husbands' needs. Women suffered from many disadvantages when it came to the workforce. When compared to men, women would earn just about 2/3 the amount of men. For those working in science, that inequality was exacerbated. Female scientists were seemingly invisible. Seeing that it was typical at the time for women to be uneducated and seen as objects, Franklin's father's views mirrored 20th century British values. But that did not stop Franklin's intellectual curiosity. If anything, it sparked it. At only 15, she knew she wanted to become a scientist. Her father did not support these ambitions, though. She studied at North London Collegiate School, where she excelled in all subjects, but particularly in science. Once Franklin passed the entrance exam for Cambridge University, her father refused to contribute a dime to further her education and dream of becoming a physical chemist. Just when she was about to let go of her dream, Franklin's aunt, Alice Franklin, offered to pay for her education in full, along with the full support of her mother. Rosalind Franklin enrolled in Cambridge University in 1938. At this time, only 23% of those enrolled in the university were women, putting Franklin in the minority. During her time studying, Franklin dealt with the guilt of losing a relationship with her father and being virtually invisible in comparison to her male peers. Still, Cambridge gave Franklin the platform to study and mature. Even with this hardship, her father's discouragement and societal barriers were only a catalyst in Franklin's journey towards reshaping science.
There's nothing like her work that she did. And I think that her dedication to her work is why we know about her.
During her time at Cambridge University, World War II erupted. Her father insisted on her going into defense work and to eventually become a social worker, given that he thought it was a more suitable job for a woman. But Franklin had a different idea. In 1942, Franklin began to study the physical structure of coal and carbon for the British Coal Utilization Research Association. She planned to discover new ways for her country to utilize coal and charcoal for the war. She published 3 papers in 3 respective years, and her research became vital to the understanding of nuclear power. This work was the basis of her doctorate in physical chemistry, which she earned from Cambridge University in 1945. After Cambridge, she spent 3 productive years from 1947 to 1950 in Paris, where she learned X-ray diffraction techniques and continued to study crystallography. Franklin made the choice to continue in a field that constantly discredited and overlooked her scientific findings, ultimately compromising with her sometimes oppressive peers.
So she was asked by the school where she was working, to use a technology called at the time, X-ray crystallography.
My understanding of her contribution is she was the first one to actually take the X-ray image of the structure.
At the time, there were a couple other models that had the nitrogenous bases on the outside and the phosphorus and the sugars on the inside. But using this technique, it really seemed to her that the bases were on the inside and the phosphorus and the sugars were on the outside.
In 1950, she was awarded a 3-year Turner and Newall Fellowship to work in John T. Randall's biophysics unit at King's College London. Randall asked Franklin to investigate DNA where she would lead a research group. The 1900s was a period of discourse for women in the workforce, especially for women in the science field, as they were often discriminated against both emotionally and in terms of benefits within their job positions, as opposed to men in the workforce who were seen to be predominantly more capable. In 1950, only 4% of doctoral degrees in chemistry, 6% of those in math, and 5% of those in physics were awarded to women. With these facts, we can understand that Franklin dealt with years of conflict in the workforce, as she had to compromise an easy and more societally accurate lifestyle for the path that she chose for herself. Franklin had to work alongside Morris Wilkins, the assistant lab chief who never understood her role as his peer and throughout their time together continued to believe she was his technical assistant. X-ray diffraction, developed in the first half of the 20th century, was one of the new technologies that made solving the structure of DNA possible. Franklin was able to get 2 sets of high-resolution photos of crystallized DNA fibers. From this, she deduced the basic dimensions of DNA strands, and that the phosphates were on the outside of what was probably a helical structure.
There was a graduate student. His name was Wilkins. He worked for 2 professors there. Rosalind Franklin was one of them. He let Watson and Crick into her office. They read her notes. They went and published that it was the bases inside and the phosphorus and sugar on the outside, and they have consequently gotten credit for figuring out the structure of DNA.
Franklin's famous 51 X-ray crystallography of the DNA structure led to Watson and Crick's breakthrough insight into the double helical structure of DNA. It was Wilkins who showed Watson and Crick the X-ray data Franklin obtained. The data confirmed the 3D structure that Watson and Crick had theorized for DNA. In 1953, Watson and Crick had all of Rosalind's data and conclusions from her most current research, without her knowledge or consent. Women were often discredited in science and needed significant evidence to prove their own findings, which explains why Franklin never revealed her own research. She believed that she needed to prove herself with the most accurate information before sharing the photos she found, and as a result, Watson and Crick, 2 big-headed male scientists, found it acceptable to steal her work. Rosalind Franklin spent her lifetime without the recognition she deserved for the discovery of the structure of DNA, and was unaware of the capacity of her findings as she continued to pursue her extensive research to uphold her reputation as a woman in science. Unfortunately, it wasn't until after her death her work was actually acknowledged.
I think that as an afterthought, she's respected for her contributions, but I think at the time, I don't think people truly understood everything that she was doing to a bigger purpose.
Franklin died of ovarian cancer in 1958. Unlike her colleagues, she was unable to be nominated for the prize 4 years after her death, and the prize was undeservingly awarded to James Watson, Francis Crick, and Morris Wilkins, with no mention of Franklin. It was not until Watson received criticism for his sexist remarks toward Franklin in his book, The Double Helix, published just 10 years after Franklin's death, that he ended up admitting to the more than remarkable part Franklin had in his discovery. The men in her life proved to be the great barrier in her overall achievement as an up-and-coming physical chemist. She made the decision to give up her own relationship with her father in order to further her unusual 20th century dreams. She also chose to be a victim of gender discrimination in her field in particular, which as a result led to her discredit. The lifestyle she chose to compromise for the life she really wanted served as her statement towards becoming one of the most influential female scientists in history. All that is necessary for faith is the belief that by doing our best, we shall come nearer to success, and that success in our aims, the improvement of the lot of mankind, present and future, is worth attaining.